Good evening, I'm Mike Goucher. This is Sunday Night.
It is my decision that police officers John A. Balcerzak, Joseph T. Gabrish, and Richard W. Perupkin be dismissed from the Milwaukee Police Department.
These are the faces and facts behind the names of the two fired police officers. John Balcerzak is 34 years old. He joined the police department in 1985 and received 19 merit arrests along with a Superior Achievement Award. Joseph Gabrish is 28. He was sworn in as a police officer in 1984. He also had 19 merit arrests along with a Superior Achievement Award. One police administrator described them as good young cops, but their lives would be changed forever the morning of May 27th. That's when Gabrish, Balcerzak, and Richard Perupkin encountered Jeffrey Dahmer and 14-year-old Conrad Synthes-Impone. They say they followed proper police procedures during their investigation, which eventually resulted in Synthes-Impone being returned to Dahmer's apartment. He was later killed. But in an exclusive interview Sunday night, Police Chief Ariola strongly criticized the officers' actions of May 27th.
What did they do? What did they do? Now, there are any number of things that they could have done, but they didn't do anything.
Ariola was also critical of Balcerzak's handling of this phone call from resident Glenda Cleveland.
What if he's a child and not an adult? I mean, are you positive this is an adult?
Ma'am, like I explained to you, it's all taken care of. It's as positive as I can be.
God, I wish that call had been received by a supervisor at that district. Perhaps we would have seen a different result.
Ariola's comments have angered the police association and some city residents. Meanwhile, attorneys for the officers today filed their appeals with the Fire and Police Commission. Next on this special primetime Sunday night, the officers' side of the Synthes-Impone story. And good evening again, and welcome to a primetime edition of Sunday Night. I'm Mike Goucher, and our guests tonight are police officer John Balcerzak, police officer Joe Gabrish, an attorney for the Milwaukee Police Association representing these officers, Lori Eggert, and the president of the Milwaukee Police Association, Brad Nebraska. Thanks to all of you for being with us tonight. Let me begin by going back to the early morning hours of May 27th. We heard in that piece that at least one top police administrator referred to you guys as good cops. Do you believe you were good cops on May 27th?
I believe I was as good a cop as I've ever been on that night and throughout my career. I've always strived to be the best type of police officer that the city of Milwaukee has ever had.
Joe, let me ask you the same question. Were you a good cop that night?
Yes. We handled the call the way we felt it should be handled, and the way that we've handled several calls much like it over the years.
The police chief, though, said they didn't do anything. He doesn't believe you did enough. Well, what do you say to that? When you heard the police chief say that, what was your response? Joe, let's begin with you.
My reaction to that was I was very surprised because of his internal investigation and the face-to-face that we had with him. We informed him everything that we knew, everything that we did, and we believe that we had come to a reasonable end to that call, that we had handled that call sufficiently. And, in hindsight, as we find out months later that this tragedy happened, I'd just like to add that at the end of a shift, we turn in a report on every call that we are at, and a code callback goes to the dispatcher afterwards, and that our actions taken on that night were acceptable for over 2 months. No one ever questioned the type of action that we did or how we handled that call until, in hindsight, this came up. And that is at that point that they looked back 2 months and began to suspect what we did, or had, at that point, indifference to what we had done.
The chief said, and again you heard him, he said, why didn't they ask for the names of witnesses? Either one of you can respond to that. Did you? And if you didn't, why not?
On our arrival at an assignment, it's our duty to address the problem that we were sent to on our arrival initially, and that's what we did. We were sent to a naked man down, and on our arrival we found what we were sent to. And we addressed that problem first and proceed from there.
Were there witnesses even there at the time?
We didn't actually get a chance to talk to any witnesses. In reality, what happened is we drove up, we focused our attention to the assignment we were sent to, as John said, naked man down in the alley. Witnesses, as we came up, approached us. They were asked very kindly to stand on the side and wait until we had the opportunity to discuss the goings-on and get a chance to interview them. There came a point where we had to deal with the fire department and talk to the fire department. These individuals again approached. They were told again, please stand back, allow us to do our investigation. We will get with you as soon as we can. At that point, the crowd of people, as well as these presumed witnesses, became basically hostile and profane towards us. And at that point, an officer had to give them a warning to stay back out of the way. They stepped back finally at that point. We continued our investigation to the fullest and to the end of the investigation, or there came a point when we felt the investigation was concluded, except for the fact that we hadn't talked to witnesses, and we returned to the squad in the alley. At that point, the crowd of people that had been there had dispersed, and there was no one to speak to. You also got to remember that the call came in anonymously. No one took a name of a caller, so there was no place to go to follow up. We further felt that there was no crime, that no crime had been committed at that point, and that we did not seek any witnesses door to door because we felt that there hadn't actually been a crime or a need to obtain witnesses at that point.
So again, based on your experience, to this day, you still feel, given the circumstances that were presented to you at that point in time, that your actions were entirely appropriate, given what you saw there in the early morning hours of May 22nd?
At the time, with the information that we had, to this day, I feel we did the appropriate and the best that we could with the information and what we had available.
I want to address a couple of other points, ones that you gentlemen have obviously heard discussed in this community a lot. One of them is a radio transmission. It involves the officers basically telling that they were done at that point in time. I'm wondering if we can roll that tape and let the audience listen, and then I want to get your perspective on what was said, why it was said, how you feel about what was said. Let's see if we can listen to that tape.
The intoxicated Asian naked male was returned to his sober boyfriend, and we're at 10-8. Before it be a minute, my partner's going to get deloused at the station.
There is a time frame in between those, so we don't want to make it seem like those were back-to-back statements. We want to make that clear. But some people are going to say that's insensitive, that that's an example of an insensitivity that is unacceptable. I want to get your perspective. Why were the comments made, and what do they represent, if anything? Either one of you can answer.
If you can, which comment, what are you referring to? In
the laughter, yeah, and then the delousing remark.
As far as my explanation as to how we handled the assignment, the way it used to be with the department, now they want a short, terse type of response, and that is not always appropriate for how we handle a situation. And I find sometimes elaboration is needed. And that's what I did as far as my response to the 10-8. Mm-hmm. As a response to the delousing, that was a comical, jocular type of way of myself expressing that my partner needed to clean up. It is a type of transmission that is commonplace on the department. Anybody that has a police scanner or any news media who has a police scanner or responds to calls would know this, and it is a common occurrence, that type of jocularity. No reference to any specific incident that you handled, but just a matter of a little bit of relief, comical type of.
So something that's said on the job Not a sign of insensitivity, is what
Correct.
you're saying. Mm-hmm. One other point about that, and that is the Glenda Cleveland phone conversation. and this is a woman who called. She was a concerned citizen, and she called because she thought she recognized Conrad Synthesimpone, the 14-year-old Laotian boy. I want to ask about the way that call was handled. The chief felt that it was not handled properly. We heard him say, "I wish a police supervisor had been there to handle the call." Again, I want to listen to the tape, and then I want to ask you why it was handled the way it was handled. Let's roll the tape, please.
What if he's a child and not an adult? I mean, are you positive this is an adult?
Ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
like I explained to you, it's all taken care of. It's as positive as I can be.
Oh, I see.
Okay, there's no, I can't do anything about somebody's sexual preferences in life.
Well, no, I'm not saying anything about that, but it appeared to have been a child. This is my concern. No,
he's not.
He's not a child.
No, he's not. Okay, and it's a boyfriend thing. And
Why the response? Was there nothing that seemed abnormal about that, or how did you handle it, and why?
Well, you have to understand that I personally was on the scene along with 4 other officers and additional personnel. We had firsthand knowledge of what it was there, and we viewed the parties that we had gotten sent to. And the conversation with Miss Cleveland begins with that she's calling for someone, that she wasn't actually there, did not actually view what was transpiring, was not directly involved in what was transpiring. And I felt that my first-hand knowledge was more informative than what she had heard from someone else. And the woman was not directly involved in what transpired, and I am not, as anyone should be, not in a position to release information regarding assignments over the telephone to someone that's calling regarding it.
When you think back on the events of that morning, both of you can answer this. Would it have been possible to do anything differently? How often do you think about what was done, and gee, could I have done it differently?
Well, obviously something like this goes through your mind, especially with the investigations and the media. It's gone through my mind thousands of times. I look back on it, and as I've said in previous interviews, that I wish there had been some other piece of evidence or information available to us if we would have seen something that stood out in the apartment or something, if we could have taken another direction. It was handled the way it would have been routinely handled. If a supervisor would have been there with us, I'm sure in my mind that the supervisor would have made the same decision that we made with the information available and under the same circumstances.
The police chief called Jeffrey Dahmer a smooth con man. I don't know if you're legally able to answer that question. Your impressions of Jeffrey Dahmer at that scene, that morning?
My conversations with Jeffrey Dahmer, he was a straightforward, calm, convincing person who voluntarily came forward with information, voluntarily cooperated, not the hint of any stress regarding what was being investigated, not the hint of any that he did not want us to continue in our investigation in any manner, but voluntarily volunteered information and cooperation with us to the extreme.
Laura, you've represented the police officers. Based on what you know at this point in time about the case, is there any room for second guessing in your mind, the officers' actions that morning?
Well, there's always room for second guessing, and no human being could go through what these officers went through without rethinking it and wondering if there was something they could have done to save this boy's life. And we now know that he was a boy. Back then they believed he was an adult. But there are always choices to be made, and what you vest in a police officer is the authority to make decisions, spot decisions, and he has to live with the decisions that he makes. There could always be other choices, and there are always different ways to investigate. And the question is not could they have done something different, but did they do the appropriate things at the time? And I think it's important that the community look at what these officers knew when they arrived at the scene, not what we now know about Dahmer, not what we now know from the witnesses. These officers did not know that at the time, and they investigated from what they had in front of them.
How difficult has it been the last 6 or 7 weeks for the two of you since the initial suspensions and now the firings? Describe what life has been like for the two of you. John, why don't you go ahead?
For me, at the time of the suspension, I was not even in Milwaukee. I was aiding and visiting my in-law, who is very ill with cancer. And I was out of state at the time, and it was a very difficult time for me to be isolated and have no conversation with anyone from the department or with any way to respond to the things that were being said about myself, my partner, and the other officers that were there. It was intensely stressful. It was a very emotional time for myself and my family at the time.
And still is, I would imagine.
Yes, it is.
Joe, same question.
Well, whether you're aware of it or not, Michael, you're the one who told me I was suspended. I'll start answering the question
on television,
that way.
on the
That's
newscast.
how I found out that I was suspended. It was upsetting and it was scary to sit in my living room and find out via that way that I was suspended, especially after I had gone forward to the commander and the detective bureau earlier in the week with information that we had been there 2 months earlier and that I had cooperated with them, and they told me not to worry, that we did everything that we possibly could have done at the time. And those are quotes from commanders in that bureau.
So they seem to support what you were saying at the time. We did everything, followed proper police procedure. We did what we could do then, and other of your commanders said, we agree, you did do that?
Yes, I spoke to several of my commanders and other supervisors throughout the department, and they made the same conclusion based on the facts that were on hand the night in question. To further answer your question, what has it been like? It's been very difficult to read the paper. In fact, I've stopped reading the paper. But to see pictures of yourself as you walk down the street on the front of a Sentinel box or things like that, and to be in a position not to really be allowed to speak out because of pending investigations and pending hearings to tell your side of the story. It's been a very difficult time.
What do you want people in this community to know about you? What should they know about Joe Gabrish, and what should they know about John Balcerzak? You said that it's been difficult for you. You feel like in many cases you've been vilified. What would you say? What kind of person are you? What do you want them to know?
Well, I think that we've both been made out to be some sort of uncaring twosome, some sort of monster, which is simply not true. And I'll speak for myself that I'm a very caring individual, and I pride myself on that. Very sensitive to the needs of my friends and to this community at large. Otherwise, I would not have chosen to work here. And I think that's important, that people realize that we chose to work down in the inner city because we wanted to help people out where we thought it was needed the most. It's a very busy area of town. They need the police down there, and that we care about the community.
John, same question. What would you like people to know about police officer John Balcerzak?
I'd like them to realize that what I was portrayed as, what my partner was portrayed as, just is not true. We are very caring, and we do love the job that we chose for our careers, and the area of the city that we chose to serve. As Joel stated, you could write for a transfer or request a different squad or something along those lines, but we chose not to. We felt that our services were needed there. And as I've displayed in the past of my career, and I've displayed, as Joe has, the willingness to work and work hard for the city, especially in a busy area of the city. And I would just like the thousands of people throughout our careers that we have had come in contact with and have helped and have gone the extra mile to help out, to solve their problems to the best of our abilities.
One final question on that, and then I want to take a break. Question of remorse. Do you feel remorse for the families? And I ask that because I hear both of you saying that, you know, we did what was right, at least in our minds, what we thought was right that time. Do you still feel remorse? Is remorse a feeling that you experience these days?
I think you have to separate the issue here. The issue that we thought we did everything right. It should be taken separately from the fact of how we feel. Obviously, this is something that's going to be with us forever, the fact that this individual died and that other individuals died after we had contact. It's hard to deal with. It's always there. And I feel personally saddened for the families of all these people that they have to go through this tragedy.
I've expressed my sorrow to, again, it was a stressful and emotional situation where I was at the time of the news, and I expressed my sorrow and emotion throughout this to the families, and as Joe stated, to know that someone who we had contact with, I've had many a situation. I've had my sergeant killed directly involved in an incident that I was at, and that this is more so emotional and stressful on myself because you begin to look back, and as Joe says, you'll never forget how close things were coming in contact with you, with an individual that died later.
I want to take a break. We will continue, and I want to talk about some of the other issues that should be explored given the events of the last 7 weeks. We'll continue on this special primetime edition of Sunday Night in just a moment.
Come to the Isuzu Invitational and you might discover that you're a real trooper. Because you'll like the four-wheel drive with auto-locking hubs, tough four-wheel disc brakes, and knowing you got the best buy in town. Best of all, you'll love saving up to $2,300 more. So hurry, the Isuzu Invitational is the perfect time to be a trooper and to compare and save, or really just save, because with Isuzu, there's no comparison. Save on Trooper at your local Milwaukee Isuzu dealer.
Warner Cable brings the great performances home this fall with exclusive new movies made just for cable on USA. Gregory Hines in the mystery thriller White Lie. Nancy McKeon is haunted in The Lightning Field. USA's big new movies every week. Installation is free. Plus, when you order HBO, you'll receive 1 free month of Cinemax.
Warner Cable. Great performances every day.
I work on a cruise ship 50 feet below the surface. Love boat, it ain't. That's why I bank with First Wisconsin. Like you, I figure making money is hard enough. Banking shouldn't be. First Wisconsin gives me the most convenient services like direct deposit and banking by phone. And best of all, I always see a friendly face.
First Wisconsin. Making money is hard enough. Banking shouldn't be.
They had every right to hate the officers that have been fired.
The pictures you've just been looking at were from last Saturday. They were of a vigil held at MacArthur Square that was in support of police officers in this community. And I want to begin this segment by talking with Milwaukee Police Association President Brad Nebraska. Brad, we've heard a lot about a diminishing of support for police officers in this community. Do you think that's true? Or do you think that perhaps this case can be separated from overall support for police?
Well, that's what we're trying to do. I think it's very apparent, based on the number of calls we are receiving and the amount of support we are receiving, at the particular events that there is widespread support for the police officers, and specifically these two officers and the other officer that was involved on May 27th. And I think a lot of it revolves around the decision by the chief. Hindsight is 20/20. And I want to follow up on some of the comments the officers made, one in particular, and that's the discretion. Back on September 26th of last year, Chief Ariola indicated that he wants to give officers and supervisors additional discretion over and above a significant amount that is inherent in the job of police or law enforcement on the streets. Well, what has happened since then is he has taken a discretionary call, and you have to remember, an officer who is on a scene of a call, hypothetically, if there's 100 pieces of data available to that individual officer, the best investigator going back to that scene may only recognize 50% of those pieces of data. But yet the chief has chosen to discharge these officers based on an hindsight 20/20 perspective on a discretionary call. And it runs inconsistent with the philosophy of law enforcement as it relates to community-oriented policing or problem-solving, conflict resolution.
Do you think, Lori Eggert, that you will eventually have to go to court to resolve this in a way that would satisfy these two men and you, or do you believe there will be a fair hearing before the Fire and Police Commission?
Well, we have to believe that there will be a fair hearing before the commission, but we also have to wonder how we can get that fair hearing when the mayor has already come out and said that he supports the decision of the chief of police. And that is a very unusual circumstance for the mayor to publicly announce that he has decided that the chief's decision was correct. And now the body that we go to on our appeal are 5 appointees, 4 of whom I believe are appointees of this mayor.
Do you expect you'll get a fair appeal? I mean, do you have any hopes that during the appeal process that the Fire and Police Commission would say, we disagree with the chief's decision to discipline you? Do you think that's a possibility, honestly?
I would hope that they would view the entire facts of the case, both internal and the other parts of the investigation. I would hope that they would see that we did act properly. That's what I hope, and I can only go one step at a time right now.
Mm-hmm. Joe, do you think there's a realistic possibility the Fire and Police Commission is going to say we disagree with the police chief?
Well, again, I hope that they do. I don't know that that'll happen or not, but rather than to sit here and say that it's not going to happen, I challenge them to look at the facts and do the right thing after they look at the facts. I believe the right thing is to reinstate us.
You both still want to be Milwaukee cops, do you not?
I would want to be a Milwaukee police officer. I'd like to be a police officer. That's what I've chosen for my career. Whether I would be able to be an effective officer after what I've gone through this entire ordeal, that's a question that would have to be answered if I was given that opportunity. I can't at this time tell you.
Mm-hmm. And I think I hear you saying you do want to be a Milwaukee cop.
I think I'd like to go back to being a police officer. I grew up in Milwaukee. This is the town I chose. This is where I applied, and I've been on this job for 9 years. My first interest right now is really to clear my name, to get this firing out of my record, because it's going to make it very difficult to go anywhere else. When they start reviewing your background, I'm sure I have 19 merit arrests and superior achievements awards and things like that, but at the same time they're going to see that at the end of that says that, I was fired for making a decision, and I'd like to clear that up.
Talk about the chasm that exists between the police chief of the city of Milwaukee and not just the police union leadership, Brad, but police officers. We are told it is a large division. We see the poll that you conducted that says 93% of the officers who returned their ballots did not have confidence in the chief. Is the gap actually that wide?
I think it's wider than even that, and more so today than when we ran the poll, and there's a reason why. Not only do they not have any confidence in the chief, they no longer hold trust in the chief. And the reason being is because of his unprecedented attitude in his publicity and statements regarding the internal investigation, that we had an understanding for as long as this police department has been here, that that information is not revealed. Even the face-to-face meetings where he said he wants to learn from the officers on an individual basis about the circumstances revolving around this. He immediately thereafter went public when we had an understanding that that information would not be recorded, nor would it be used in any trial or anything subsequent to that face-to-face. That is the understanding we had with the chief. He has violated that. The officers can no longer sit in front of the chief and expect him to hold that information confidential. So it has skewed the whole system. So now we have, in terms of support for the chief, not beyond the lack of confidence, the lack of trust and sincerity in the office. And that is going to create problems down the road.
He said the other night, though, he said, you know, my job is not to win a popularity contest. My job is to serve the community. If the officers don't like him, is that, I mean, should they like him? We all know bosses we don't like. I think it's pretty typical for most employees not to like their bosses. How important is that?
Let me answer it this way. The chief of police stated unequivocally when we were on 2 labor retreats that his constituency rests in this rank: the mayor, the common council, the fire and police commission, and the community, and the police officers last. So one has to wonder what the mission of the office of the chief of police now is. Is it to serve the community, or is it to serve the political needs of the mayor? He has stated publicly his constituency in that order. In fact, I have a document to that effect. We are hired to serve the community, the officers, and that is our mission. But when we have the chief of police, whose constituency is the mayor, it becomes very difficult with this political concept to carry out our goals.
I want to continue on that path, but I want to take a break right now. We'll continue with this special edition of Sunday Night in just a moment.
To be number one and stay number one requires size, flexibility, strength, and customer satisfaction. Ford's Phones and Fitness. They're back at North Point Ford, Wisconsin's largest. Now nearly 800 new and used 91 and 90 cars and trucks include a $548 deluxe one-year membership to Vic Tanny and a portable car phone worth $459. Plus 200 new 91 Escorts include 2.9% 48-month no-limit financing. North Point Ford! On North 76th.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Across town, across the country, wherever your trail leads, you know Citgo quality will always keep you well on your way. Till we meet again.
Where can you get fresh center-cut bone-in pork chops for $1.58 a pound? With your Century ad coupon. Where can you get Dole Premium Golden Bananas for just 28 cents a pound? With your Century ad coupon. Where can you get Century Brand Premium Frozen Pizza for only $1.98 each? With your Century ad coupon. And where can you get Borden's Ice Cream assorted flavors 1/2 gallon for $1.38? With your Century ad coupon. For great low prices, shop Century Foods.
Mr. Nebraska, who in some respects, as a union official, and I've said this to him, I said, you know, why don't you try to be like Walter Reuther instead of Jimmy Hoffa, and somehow work with me and work with the department towards mutual goals.
The words of Police Chief Philip Ariola on Sunday night. We'll let you respond to that. Has he said that to you? Why can't you be more like Walter Reuther rather than Jimmy Hoffa? And what has your response been to that?
First, this police union has worked with the Milwaukee Police Department up until the point that he came on board. As it relates to name calling, I want to apologize to the community for the office of the Chief of Police. The police chief has to give this community an apology for name calling. As far as I'm concerned, it's unbecoming and it's unprofessional for a police chief to call not only myself, but any individual in this community names. It's inappropriate.
He would say, though, it's inappropriate, Brad, for the International Association president to come to town and tell him he ought to resign because he's not competent to do the job. I guess the question I'm asking, is it personal between the chief and you?
Well, apparently he's taken it personal. I'm not. And let me tell you why. Ever since this chief came to town, there are certain things that he has not done. And obviously the community is the top priority. Even though he puts it on the bottom of his list, that's the top priority he should be working towards. Reduction of crime, safety in the community. That's on the bottom of his list. But he suggested that this union was confrontational ever since he came. And I'm not so sure it was initially, but shortly thereafter. And let me explain why the confrontation started. We had an officer who died in the line of duty chasing somebody, had a heart attack. The chief failed to show up at the hospital to comfort the family, to show care, that the city of Milwaukee and the police department would do everything they could to take care of the family. He just didn't come. We brought it to his attention. We said, Chief, this is a traditional practice. It's very important that the chief of police, when an officer dies in the line of duty, to come to the hospital. Well, that started it, and it went downhill from there. Now the Dahmer case arises, and of course, he immediately took on this attempt to influence every rank in the police department by calling an internal meeting inside the police administration building, played a portion of the tape we heard early on your show, and selected information out of the criminal investigation and some of his closing comments. And we're getting a better feel of the chief in general. Who is this chief? We're to suggest, and it's real close to a quote, nobody in this city is going to tarnish my image. He does take it very personal. We're not talking about justice or help in the community. We're talking about the chief's ego and his image and his resume. And that's very problematic for law enforcement when we see this.
Let me move over to two men who were officers. I don't know whether you can comment on this. Maybe you don't want to comment on it because of the status of your case, but can you describe morale on the force right now? What was it like? I'll leave that to your discretion. I watched the attorney breathe a sigh there. Answer it any way you feel comfortable.
Prior to the incident, morale has constantly been downhill for a wide range of reasons. I'm speaking from a personal knowledge at 3rd District on the late shift. Bodies are taken from us and not replaced. And the workload is still there and ever increasing. And there's no resolution from your boss, the chief of police, to solve that problem, to aid you in what you're doing for your community.
What do you think of what the chief has done? I mean, he's made it very clear that he wants his officers to relate well to the community, that he wants his officers to go the extra mile, which he said in a videotape that was played for all the officers back a couple of weeks before the Conrex and Disappoint incident. Is he this universally hated figure, or do people feel less strongly about him than that?
I think that there's a lot of disappointment in him. He's not even in this city 2 years, and 94% of his men do not stand behind him. And for those reasons, that there's shortages in manpower, he specializes and he takes men away from certain things and doesn't replace them. I think he's got to go back to some basics and look at the problems of the increase of the calls and the increase of crime and homicides and pay a little more attention to those items before he starts specializing here and there and taking manpower away from where it's truly needed.
I'm going to talk about your encounter with the chief, not the word encounter, but your face-to-face meeting with the chief. You've been quoted, Joe, I heard you on the radio the other day saying that you really felt he had his mind made up pretty much. Is that the case for both of you when you had your face-to-face meeting with him? Did you think the decision had already been made, this was a formality?
I felt very strongly that his mind had already been made up before that. In fact, the way the whole thing came off that afternoon, we arrived there at 2 o'clock. That was the time we were supposed to be there, and we were left standing in the hallway till shortly before 3, and we were never given a reason or apologized to for being treated in such a fashion. And he fully knew that the media was out at the place where we met at the academy. Once inside, every time I attempted to answer questions, it was cut short or interrupted by him. And even at one point, he made the thing that, or the statement rather, that because I had an impeccable record, this was what made it so hard on him, as if he was inferring that he had already made up his mind. I truly believe he did before we went in there. In fact, the other day, when he came out, I believe he said that he had all the information he needed already as of the 25th or 26th of July. I truly believe his mind was made up long ago.
He said you had an impeccable record. Did he convey disappointment to you? Did he say because of your records, which, as we stated earlier, certainly have been good, solid police records, did he say that flat out, that he was disappointed in you?
To me, he stated during my face-to-face with him that my record speaks highly of me, and he stated that, not that it made him hard on him, but that it was a difficult decision for him. My face-to-face, I went into it with an open mind, hoping that the chief would, but I soon found that his mind was closed to what he said he was there for, and that was to listen to the officers.
One more question about that, and I'll ask Lori Eggert this question. Lori, there were rumors around town, and if you would comment on them, please, that there was a possibility, at least, of these two individuals being given the same punishment as Richard Porubkin, and that I don't want to call it a deal, but that agreement would basically be that there would be some sort of, for lack of a better term, apology or statement of remorse on their part, or a statement that perhaps we didn't use the best of judgment, and then they might also be held in abeyance as Officer Porubkin has been. Was that ever kicked around, and would that have been acceptable?
No one ever approached us with any kind of a deal. I don't know if there was a deal worked out with Officer Porubkin, or if that was just the chief's determination that that was the appropriate discipline. I don't know that that would have been considered by us in any serious manner. I don't think it's particularly useful to do the what-ifs on this, but these officers, I believe, would have had great difficulty in saying they did something wrong that night when they honestly believe that they handled the call properly. I don't believe they have any problem expressing remorse or sadness for how the call turned out. And like everyone else, everyone in the world wishes they hadn't believed Jeffrey Dahmer, and I'm sure that's true for these officers, too.
It's time to take another break. We'll be back with Sunday Night in just a moment.
Every business morning, while the rest of the world is getting up, UPS is guaranteeing overnight delivery before 10:30 for far less than other companies charge. And every business morning, more people are waking up to that fact.
Good morning.
A furnace? Not a day of trouble, ever.
Must be a good one.
Must be a Lennox.
It must be. Now get cash back or 0% financing.
If you're looking for quality and a company that's reliable, I would suggest LaSherity Moore Jones for a scene.
For quality proven over 110 years of family business, call my friend Dave Drakamp.
We strive to keep your family comfortable.
Attaboy, Dave.
Who else treats you right with a taste fantastic like the Peanut Buster Parfait for just $1.39? Dairy Queen with crunchy peanuts and layers of thick hot fudge. Who else treats you right with a $1.39 banana split? Absolutely delicious. The Dairy Queen Peanut Buster Parfait and Banana Split, only at your Dairy Queen store. Now only $1.39 each. We treat you right. Dairy Queen.
Let us tell the citizens that the nature of this job is stressful, and their efforts are often rewarded by being spat upon.
That was something said by Alderwoman Annette Sherbert at a rally that was held at City Hall shortly after this all began. Is that true? Do people, and we've asked this, I guess, in other ways tonight, but do people not appreciate police officers, or is that an overstatement? I don't get, in my conversations with people in the public, I still feel like people are pretty supportive of police.
I have a tendency to agree with you. I think the point Alderman Sherbert was trying to make was that all too often the media doesn't give the exposure to the life of a police officer. You know, along with the rates in violent crime across the board in the violent crime categories comes an extreme amount of danger for police officers, and that is escalating likewise. But along with that comes additional arrests, time away from the family, additional time in court, missed holidays, and a whole array of stress-inducing factors that we don't put any emphasis on. And unless we recognize those things, we are not going to get the proper support from the community that should come from the community, because this police department is still one of the best, even without support for the chief. We will continue to do a professional job in a professional manner.
I want to get an opinion from the three others around here, in addition to Brad. One of the things we've heard talked about in this is that this is an issue that somehow seems to have split the community along racial lines. And I know as an attorney, maybe you're not the best person to ask about this, but you work with these officers and other police officers. Are there deep racial divisions in the way police are perceived in this community?
I think everyone has their own perceptions of whether police are racist or police are fair, and I don't think there's much that people can do to change your innate perceptions. But I do firmly believe, my perception is, that police officers are there to deal with crime and to protect citizens and to investigate calls. And I don't think that they make the distinctions of black and white when they investigate a call. And particularly in this situation where there was some feeling or belief by part of the community that these officers just blew off the witnesses because they were black. I think that's ridiculous, where these officers deal day in and day out with black citizens. If they blew off black citizens all day long, there would be nothing for them to do at work. And these officers have demonstrated throughout their careers that they do take comments by all citizens seriously. They investigate everything, and they have not made those distinctions in their lives.
You've heard it, I'm sure, Joe and John. I mean, I've heard it too. People say, let's change the circumstances of the Dahmer case. Jeffrey Dahmer is a black man, and Conrad Sapone is a white young man. Would that have made any difference?
In my mind, it wouldn't have made any difference whatsoever. We had the facts that there was a caring relationship between two individuals, and we believe that that relationship had existed, and it wasn't based on any race, creed, color. We never make decisions based on that. We do with the facts at hand. We investigate to our fullest and come up with a solution to the problem, and that's why we're sent there, to come up with some sort of solution to take care of a problem at hand.
I'll let you reply to that, Joe.
I would say the same thing, and I would also like to add that our records, work records, and what we've done throughout our career for that part of the city should speak for itself. I feel that everything that both Joe and I have done throughout our careers is totally based on the facts. You don't take into consideration that the victim or suspect is white or black or Hispanic or whatever race there may be, or like Joe says, it's just not done. If it were done, I would be the first to come forward and not want that type of officer for my partner, as I'm sure Joe would too.
How tough is it to be a cop these days, in your mind?
Seems like it's getting tougher every day. For whatever reason, the crime is increasing so rapidly in this city. You can see just by the homicide rate alone, it's doubled since I began in 1984. And that's just a small part of what's going on. There's increases in all sorts of crime. And with those increases in crime, there comes the increase in the calls for service for police officers. And there just doesn't seem to be enough officers on the street to handle the amount of calls that are coming in right now. And that's resulting in great backlogs for police service and calls for police, and it's further resulting in people having to wait several hours for an officer to arrive sometimes.
I'd just like to add on that is that we bear the brunt of what's being done with this department because we are the most accessible to a person when we respond to a call. Many a time it's brought to our attention that a call came into the department 5 hours earlier, and sad to say, 5 hours earlier I was not working at the time. I was at home, and it's a tough situation that you have to explain to the people that call and need the police that we have no control over that as the officer on the street. We respond as quickly as we ever did, if not faster. It's just that we don't get the calls because of manpower constraints and so forth.
I want to ask one more question about, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask it, and again, answer it as you see fit. And Lori, if you're bothered by the question, you can jump in, but let me say this. That there are going to be some people who say that the one question I have about those early morning hours is if they had run a check on Jeffrey Dahmer, all of this might have been different. First of all, is that typical to people run checks, and would there have been any guarantee that Jeffrey Dahmer's record would have been something that would show up and be available to you?
Well, we don't routinely check out complainants or people who have come forward to help us out, and that's what Jeffrey Dahmer did. He had come forward. He wanted to help us. He very cooperative. It's not routinely done that you would scrutinize a complainant or somebody that's willing to help you. They're insulted by things like that, and they're remiss. They don't want to get involved for future things for fear that that's going to happen. And for that reason, it's not routinely done at all cases unless you're suspect of something, and we weren't at the time. I think John can continue with that thought.
Just the intimidation that would be felt by someone who is coming forward to help an officer on the street would be immense. This Mr. Dahmer was, as Joe said and I said earlier, was as calm and as cooperative as could be. There was took us voluntarily, went back to his apartment. We voluntarily, no hesitation about entering his apartment. There was absolutely nothing that would lead you to believe that this was not as a call, the numerous, countless other calls that we've handled throughout our careers.
And his story during the entire time you were there seemed consistent to you? Yes. What he said, that this is so-and-so, John Mung, or whatever his name was at that point in time?
What he gave us as what was happening there were substantiated by what we observed, the totality of the whole situation. We continued to investigate, went back to substantiate his statements at his apartment, and everything was corroborated, and there was nothing that was out of place.
Time for one final break. We'll continue on Sunday night. Be back with the final segment in just a moment.